Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. My name is Emery Cuzzy, and I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby. And today we're going to go over the quarterback fantasy football rankings. I'll tell you what, it's going to be one of our favorite videos. You know, you getting into all this, like I know everybody's going to have all kinds of say, and you know it's our 1.0 put out for our position rankings, and we're really excited. They're not going to look like all the other sites. We're going to be very different on some things. We're going to have take stands on some people, and yeah, it's going to be fun. So
yeah, I mean, we're painting stories, we're painting narratives, and we're also paying attention to strength of schedule and stackability. All of those things are factoring in. Obviously, there's five. When we look up and we're talking about the averages of where their position rank is, well, we're talking about ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, PPR version of Sleeper, Best Ball being DK and Underdog. Obviously, there's some that are half PPR, some are full PPR. Either way, it doesn't matter on quarterbacks. But yeah, it's essentially we're going to be talking about this. We have an overall rankings video, but we're going to get into positional rankings. We'll probably put out a 2.0 this time next month-ish.
yeah, right around training camp.
Really before training camp, there's nothing that goes on. It's all speculation. So I don't know what's going to change much within the next 4 weeks. But right now, we got to put out our first one. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so looking up on the board, you got tier 6. These are the guys that you're just hoping can get you through the bye week. And of course, you know, you look up there. There's a guy that's not even probably starting week 1. But you know, let's start at the bottom. You got Bryce Young for Carolina, one of the easiest schedules in football. Doesn't play a single ranked team until the week 11. So,
and again, we have our own, you know, strength of schedule and you know, points against quarterbacks and all that stuff that we'll get into, but we're kind of going off PFF because it really correlates with what our rankings are at this point. Carolina, 4th easiest strength of schedule in terms against quarterbacks. Overall against receivers, best strength of schedule. And it's just an ugly, doesn't feel great because they were the worst team last year. He had one of the worst rookie seasons ever. But they added a ton of pieces around him. New running back, new tight end, a couple of new receivers, and Deontay and Xavier Legette, who's was the last pick of the first round. There's upside, and they're going to be behind. I think it'll be a more competitive team, whether it be 4 to 6 wins. It doesn't matter what the record is. I don't think that they'll be down 31-0 a ton. And, you know, they'll have to be throwing the ball. They have the schedule to do it. And again, you're not drafting to start him. He'll be undrafted in redraft leagues. Most of the 15 through 25 are going to be undrafted guys. But at the end of the day, these are best ball picks that if you aren't strong at quarterback, you need that third quarterback that can get you a couple weeks, get you through the bye if you double down on a certain bye week. And he's the guy that we think that, you know, has some short week upside.
Yeah, and so then going over to the next one, Will Levis, he's actually right where he's being drafted overall. You know, he's 24th across the board in every single drafting platform except for ESPN. So I think that you know is pretty solid where we have him. I don't think that he needs to go up or down. He just makes it okay. He's got a good set of receivers. Chigakonkwo, we thought he might be, you know, a pretty good receiving tight end, but
yeah, the thing is, it's a brand new regime. It's no longer Derrick Henry give it to him 25 times and you know, low volume or low output Ryan Tannehill-esque kind of seasons. It's more spread out. They brought in Calvin Ridley. They brought in Tyler Boyd. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is still there. Chigakonkwo, below average tight end, but he's serviceable as a receiving tight end. And then the running backs that they invested in are scat backs, both Tony Pollard and then Tajay Spears, who is now a second-year running back. They're basically the same type of running back. So it's a lot of spreading the ball around. They're going to be the worst team in the division, 6-7 win team that is going to be throwing a lot. And if he can, you know, he has the pieces to make it work, and that's why he's in this tier.
Yeah, and I think he, you know, fits perfectly, and they're going to give him the reins to throw it. It's not like he's not going, you know, he is the guy. So he's going to have opportunities. Doesn't have a lot to do with his feet, though. And then moving up, we actually have, this is our biggest difference based on ranking, is Justin Fields. He is 7 spots higher on average versus the rest of the platforms. So if he starts, he will have he'll probably be top 15 that week, in top 12 that week in ranking, just
Yeah,
because of his legs.
I mean, it's completely warranted and justified why people have him as 30 because he's not even guaranteed to start. But again, this range, it's not to have a long-term season-long option. This is I need a week or two, or waiver wire, my quarterback goes down.
Mm-hmm.
I need somebody to fill out through the bye week or this 4-week stretch that my quarterback's down. If we know he's starting, every week he has 25-point upside,
Yep.
despite his tough schedule. I mean, we've seen it when he has 100 passing yards, but 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And that's a QB3 for the week. Like, he has that upside, and nobody else in this range, or even in the tier 5 range, has that consistent upside when he is the starter. And he's going in a range where his ADP is 17th round, 18th round, obviously undrafted in redraft. There's no reason to not pull the trigger if you need a third quarterback.
Right.
If it correlates, he's one of 2 teams with the week 9 bye. It's really easy to get away from that, to double that. And stacking wise, for him with reasonable price, Pickens is not going in the top 25 of receivers right now, and there's just nobody else to compete for targets. So he has upside as well. It just makes too much sense to not mention him, even if he doesn't start a lick. We're looking for gems
Yeah, and he's
late in the
definitely
draft.
yeah. And one thing too is like I know people in redraft leagues are gonna stash him as like if something happens and he starts, like him being my last pick in redraft is not gonna like kill you probably.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends how deep your bench is, of course, but
Right.
those are obviously things that you have to deal with when you're drafting. Is we actually shortened our bench in
Mm-hmm.
our league, makes the waiver wire more exciting. But if you have a deeper bench, you could say, okay, this is a
There,
guy,
there's
sixth
just
guy on my bench,
there's
whatever.
just no denying, even if he goes undrafted and redraft, if we know Russell Wilson goes down or is no longer the starter, the number one spend all your fab on is Justin Fields if you need him.
Right.
And if you don't get the luxury of having a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and you're kind of in the middle with the Brock Purdy and Justin Herbert, and you have to every single week just cross your fingers and hope that he's the reason they're scoring touchdowns. Justin Fields will have way more rushing upside than any of those guys.
Right. And so moving from that tier, we're going to get to tier 5. These are the quarterbacks with an occasional boom week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, starting with Aaron Rodgers, we're actually much lower on him. He's one of our
He's our lowest negative differential between average consensus and our ranking at 22. He was kind of right in the middle. I just don't like the vibes. This is kind of an emotional pick, but also it's kind of justified because it's been 2.5 years since he's had a 300-yard game.
Yeah.
And, below average offensive line. Receivers, okay, yeah, Mike Williams he's coming off ACL. And Malachi Corley, it's not his guy, but we just don't know with him. He's never really targeted his tight ends throughout his career. And Garrett Wilson, we're high on, but that's really it.
That's the only
and
guy.
So it's stacking him and Rodgers, but I'm not ever comfortable every week on a weekly basis coming off an Achilles starting him.
Right.
And that's my problem.
Well, and then you have Brees Hall. Let's see, the only two bright spots for New York are Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson. It's not Aaron Rodgers. It's not anybody else. They lean on their defense, and they're probably not going to score a ton of points.
And he's coming out, we need to avoid distractions and all this stuff, and then he misses mandatory minicamp.
Right.
And he's the only starter that does on the team. And it's to go to an undisclosed trip that we will find out soon, and it's probably going to make him look even worse because this was something that you had to plan to miss. And regardless, even if that isn't a big deal, maybe it's not, he's still, from a productivity standpoint, hasn't done enough to warrant being,
12th.
the 12th ranked
That's
quarterback
crazy.
on ESPN. That is idiotic to have him that high. It doesn't make any sense, and he deserves to be in this tier somewhere. If you have some of these guys above him or below him, sure, fine. But the thing is, he's going to where, you need to be picking him as a firm QB2. And, I am more uncomfortable with that. And he's probably more in 3 quarterback builds and best ball drafts for me. That's my preference. But yeah,
And I don't think I have any Aaron
I have 0.
Rodgers, so that's always fun. Because he's just going too high for our liking.
Hmm.
But moving up, Baker Mayfield, a guy that, is probably still getting, the short end of the stick after having a pretty solid season, you know, two really good receivers, a solid tight end, a good receiving running back, and adding Jalen McMillan too. So it's like we need to stop the Baker hate, but he's actually in the range of where we have him going. He's only positive about one whole spot for us, but still, it's like Baker does not get enough love. I feel like,
Yeah, I mean, again, the entire NFC South has the easiest strength of schedule. I mean, against quarterbacks, it's seventh,
hmm,
but reasonably priced where you can stack him. Kate Otten's basically an undrafted and redraft tight end. Chris Godwin is going in the middle rounds. Mike
yeah,
Evans a little pricier than he was last year, but it's not crazy to invest him as a wide receiver 2 on your team and then stack him later. Um, he did fine. I mean, his best football was at the end of the year last year. Even better schedule this year, despite winning the division. So I'm excited to see what he does. He's fine. He's serviceable. He's probably the last quarterback I would consider as I'm fine with him as my QB2. If I did invest in one of those higher tier quarterbacks, him as my QB2 with one of them is probably a great route. Other than that, you probably got to go the 3 quarterback route.
right. And so then Matthew Stafford, who has all the talent at receiver right now.
Hmm.
Um, and the problem with Matthew Stafford is you're just not going to get any rushing upside. He's
Right.
just not going to move, and that's the biggest issue with this. This kind of range. You get the Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins. None of those guys are moving. In the pocket. So,
Exactly.
um,
And then also in this tier, he has the worst strength of schedule.
mhm,
He has 6th worst against quarterbacks this year. And then also stacking options, right? Tyler Higbee, obviously, he tore his ACL in the playoffs. He is probably might not even be ready to, one, start the year, but two, even play this season
right.
because it was a pretty rough injury. So it's really just Puka and Cooper and Kyron, and all of them are going in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah.
So you really have to hit that nail and commit early if you're going the Rams route. It's kind of tough to do, but it's reasonable if you wanted to go that route. That's just kind of my thoughts. He's right, kind of smack dab in the middle of this tier.
Yeah. And then Kirk Cousins, going to the new team in Atlanta. He's actually lower for us by about a position and a half, versus consensus. And, I think it has a little bit to do with just, coming off an injury like that.
Yeah, it's straight up the injury.
Yeah.
You just don't know. Obviously, him and Aaron Rodgers both coming off an Achilles injury. Well, there's a little bit of a difference because Aaron Rodgers, it's his lead foot.
Mm-hmm.
It's Kirk Cousins' plant foot.
Right.
And I feel like that's a much more significant in terms of velocity and ability to throw the football down the field. It might cause a little bit more concern. Some of the things that we've liked because we have taken some Kirk Cousins because it's really easy to stack the non-Drake London portion of Atlanta, whether it's Darnell Mooney in the 11th round or Rondell Moore, who's undrafted in redraft, but
Kyle
in best
Pitts.
ball, he's 20th. Kyle Pitts, he's like the next man up in the second tier of receiver tight ends,
Right.
and it's easy to get to. But when we do invest in Kirk, a way to kind of strengthen your concerns or risk of it is late round pick Michael Penix, because I don't view it as if Kirk Cousins goes down, Michael Penix isn't ready to go in and put up very similar numbers.
Right. He's the 24-year-old quarterback
Yeah.
that was ready. We talked about this, so, all offseason that him and Bo Nix were the guys that were like, okay, well, they're the oldest. They're the most, they need to start now.
Hmm.
And now you have Penix sitting in the way. And if he takes over the job, it's like Kurt could come back obviously and play over him. But like if something happens like bad enough, I don't know that they just go straight back to Kirk if they think Penix can do it. Deshaun Watson, we're actually higher on by
Yeah.
3.8 positions.
So he's our third highest, above consensus average.
Yeah.
But basically everybody has him in this tier. We're just putting him at the top of the tier for 2 reasons. One, because Cleveland actually, despite having the toughest overall strength of schedule this year, 6 easiest against quarterbacks and easiest for wide receivers. So somewhat of a reasonable schedule. Uh, the stacking options are really easy. It's really easy to get to Mark Cooper as your second or even third receiver.
Right.
David Njoku killed it. I said in a previous video how basically his floor, the final 5 week or 5 games of the season, was 16 fantasy points for PPR purposes. Was excellent. He's tied in 11 right now. Jerry Judy, whether or not you believe in him, cool. But last year, him and Elijah Moore are basically the same, circumstance of bust that goes to Cleveland. Elijah Moore was going in the 7th, 8th round last year. He's going in like the 12th round.
Right.
Very easy as a sixth receiver to get there if you want to. And then Deshaun Watson, 15th round. He has rushing upside. I know basically people are just have given up on, oh, he'll get back to his Houston prime at some point. I don't know if he will or not, but
You're not paying
the
for it though.
everything on paper is there for him
Yeah.
to at least be reasonable. And again, this is more of a best ball pick. He's probably undrafted in redraft leagues or at the very tail end. I don't know if I'm ever comfortable starting him or selecting to start him,
Mm-hmm.
but there are going to be the occasional week that he has the 20 or 22 fantasy points, and that's going to, fit in for a guy that just didn't hasn't really shown it since he's gotten there.
Right. And so then we're going to move over to the tier 4. This is the tier that we consider too talented to be here, but not consistent enough to be a QB1. This is all the way up to 13. This is right on the end of QB1 range before you jump into QB2. Start with Tua. Tua's actual rankings are all kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
But it has to do with the fact that he has the talent around him, but even with that talent, he has no rushing upside, and he has not really broken in, even with the most yards.
Mm-hmm.
He has not broken into that top 12.
Exactly.
So,
like last year, he led the league in passing yards and still was not a QB1.
Right.
Despite all the injuries of season-ending injuries, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, I could go on, and he still didn't get as a per game basis, as a QB1. He also has injury history. Also, into this season schedule, you got Green Bay, Jets, Houston, San Fran at Cleveland. It's not a great stretch. We talked about it on our biggest losers in terms of scheduling when they came out. It was a lot of Miami.
Yeah.
And it's mainly because it's just they got to play a lot of cold games late, and it's hard to trust that. Again, he's going right now in the middle rounds. He's a QB2, and he will have the occasional 25-point game, but I don't know when that is. And again, if I had two of these quarterbacks on my roster and I had to pick every single week, it would drive me crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because these guys, they're their inconsistency, right, is the problem. That's why it's up there. And next up, Jared Goff. No rushing upside again, and also he has a ton of people to target. He's gonna have big, games 14 games in domes, but he just feels very much Tua to me. Mm-hmm. Same way.
He has a very ideal circumstances, like you said, several games in the dome. He's much better at home than he is on the road. He's always been that way as a quarterback. Stackable options. If you got a mid-round pick, Amon-Ra St. Brown, you can't go wrong. He's as safe as it gets in that range. And then Sam Laporta is our tight end 1. We love Jahmyr Gibbs as well. Jameson Williams, former first-round pick, that all you need to do is be the 5th best skill player. And he's going in the middle rounds as well. Problem is that they're going to be one of the highest-scoring teams, but there are weeks where they'll put up 30 points and he'll have 0 touchdowns.
Right.
And then there's going to be weeks where there's 21 points, but he has 3 touchdowns. And I don't know when those weeks happen, because every week they'll put up 30 points. But is it going to be involving him or not? And again, like you said, no rushing upside. Even QB sneaks, he hasn't really been much of a factor in those. And so that's kind of why he's here. Easy to stack with. They're all going at reasonable ranges. But it's just, again, this whole tier is just hard to trust.
Yeah. And then going up to Jaden Daniels, I actually was like, I think we had him lower prior. But I was like, hey, we need to move him up probably just because he has that rushing upside that the last 2 guys did not have. He's probably going to be playing from behind at times, things like that. While You don't see that with Detroit. Detroit doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have that problem. So he'll be throwing the ball more. He has a good group of receivers. You know, like they're
See, it's fine, but if Terry McLaurin goes down, it's a bottom 3 group,
fair,
and it's a brand new, Cliff Kingsbury. Everybody, the whole jury is still on him if he can be an NFL offensive mind.
right?
And again, rookie quarterbacks typically it's kind of up and down. And again, Washington last year, nobody allowed more sacks than Washington, and they didn't really do much to improve their offensive line this offseason. So I feel like he'll be running around a lot. There'll be some growing pains,
Right.
especially early on. Um, Not a terrible schedule to deal with. He's kind of right in the middle of the pack. 24th is what it is, but I just again don't know when those boom weeks are coming, and he could be trailing 21 after 2 interceptions, but then be trailing the whole game and then have 80 rushing yards from scrambling and then score and
Yeah.
all of a sudden be a QB5 for the week.
Right. And that's the upside part of this with him. And that's why maybe not a great idea for redraft because, I mean, him going, I've seen his rank being, he's ranked 11th for underdog, which, okay, in best ball, he makes more sense. Not where he's currently ranked, not even close, but in best ball, he makes more sense because he does have those boom weeks in his bag.
Right.
While, other guys are a little bit safer. Talking about a guy in Justin Herbert, we have him higher than consensus by a little bit, but with him, he's a really odd and hard player to rank because you do not know what Jim Harbaugh will be doing,
Yep.
first off. And second off, he doesn't have an alpha receiver. He is just going to be, very Tom Brady like, where Tom Brady was throwing it to everybody and created these like Julian Edelmans. Julian Edelman without Tom Brady is probably nothing. Well, Justin Herbert is going to have to be that guy this year, creating, making players and really elevating them.
I mean, he's kind of smack dab in the middle. Strength of schedule 16th against quarterbacks, reasonable. It's fine. It's just the early buy is tough, and then also, like you said, the volume wise, I read a tweet from somebody who was like, vacated targets, and obviously Eckler's gone, Allen's gone, Williams is gone, Everett's gone. Oh yeah, he's still going to throw over 600 times. No, the hell he's not.
No.
I actually would say he would be one of the few favorites that could, outside of quarterbacks that could potentially be benched or outside of injury concerns, be the lowest in terms of attempts per game. And he does have some sneaky upside rushing. Hasn't really consistently displayed it, but we've seen the occasional like, oh my god, he just ran for 45 yards.
Yeah, he got them long legs.
Like he's
He'll
got
take
those
off.
long legs. He'll take off. I think a lot of the Chargers, it's a little bit of wait and see, and I think his price is baked in. This entire tier, he's the lowest average at 16.6. We have him at 14. Again, if you prefer somebody else before him, fine. Probably feels better if you stack Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels or Jared Goff and Amon-Ra or Tua and Tyreek or Brock Purdy and pick your favorite San Fran guy over Herbert and McConkey. But, he's the most talented by far in this group.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we just put him right in the middle, a little bit above because of the respect for what he has. And then we have optimism for what the Chargers can do this year. We just don't know how they're going to do it.
I always bet on talent. Always. And like you said, he's by far the most talented guy right now. I mean, Jaden Daniels has not played a snap of football in the NFL, so he could end up being more talented.
Yep.
But Justin Herbert, you look at that list, he's by far the most talented quarterback in that group. But he doesn't have an alpha, and the other guys have alphas.
Yep.
Brock Purdy has 3 alphas, damn near. I mean, he's got guys everywhere. The reason he's so high is because of the talent that's around him. You have the Deebo Samuel, you have the Brandon Ayuk, you have Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, you have George Kittle, who we still, is to us talent wise the best tight end in football. Ricky Pearsall's added, Jawan Jennings, like the list goes on, and Brock Purdy being at 13 for us is actually tied for the lowest ranking he has out of all of his out of all the consensus rankings. So
yeah, I mean, he by default is going to put up numbers, but we just don't know how consistent those numbers will be. He had as many games last year scoring below 18 points than he did scoring above 20.
Yeah.
It's just up and down. It's left and right. And
Christian McCaffrey gets the ball.
on top of that, because of where everybody's going, nobody's at a discount in that offense. Even Ricky Pearsall is going before like every other, second tier rookie receiver that has clear upside for volume, like Jermaine Burton or
Yeah,
Roman Wilson.
exactly.
He's going above them, and he's the sixth option on his own offense. Christian McCaffrey is 101. Debo and Brandon Ayuk, you probably got to get it at the second or early third round.
Yeah.
George Kittle is higher on most people's rankings than especially us. You got to get him in the fifth or sixth round, and it's just like you have to, just kind of similar to Matthew Stafford. You have to, find out very early, like, hey, we have to go see if I have the first pick. I have to go CMC and then pick one of the San Fran receivers that I'm uncomfortable with,
Right.
and that's my start of my team. And that's just not how I want to build my roster. Um, he's obviously the highest average compared to these guys, highest ADP, but I just don't want him as my QB1.
So sorry. Let's go. Yeah. So jumping over to tier 3. There we go. It worked. This is top 5 upside guys, and they have affordable stacking options, just a little bit more, they're a little scarier than the guys above them. Trevor Lawrence. He is one of our favorite guys, like above his ADP average. So he's 5.2 above, which is a big jump. He's above all that second tier, but he would be the lowest. The tier 4, but he would be the lowest ranked in that tier 4. So
other
much higher.
than Justin Fields, who obviously it's an undrafted or QB3 situation, he's the only guy probably that's in a whole different tier than what the consensus is. Because even Deshaun is higher, but he's still tier 5.
Yeah.
No matter where you put him. With Trevor, we actually have him in the tier of QB1, which is very much against consensus. Yahoo has him as QB20. And to me, I'm buying the dip straight up. I can't justify it with numbers or just, it's just a belief. It's a vibe, because he is a very talented guy. He's getting crapped on a lot because yesterday he signed a extension, which annually right now makes him the tied for the highest paid player. That's how the market goes. It does not matter. At the end of the day, he's got a cheap receiving room.
Yeah.
Ton of options everywhere. Evan Ingram was tied into last year. They had one of the better value picks in the first round this year when Brian Thomas Jr. fell to him. Christian Kirk has been very solid, actually, since he signed there. And Gabe Davis has an occasional 98-yard touchdown. Travis Etienne was a top 5 running back last year. He has all the weapons. He has an offensive mind. And last year, they were leading the division 10 weeks through and were on pace for the 1 seed and just
imploded,
fell apart with injuries. He dealt with about 4 major injuries last year, and he played through everyone until the AC joint sprain.
Right.
We like him a lot. Strength of schedule is kind of slightly below average. But, like I said, I'm buying the dip. And right now, it doesn't take a lot to invest in him. Even though he's our QB12, that doesn't mean we're picking him in the first 8 rounds.
Right.
That just means that we're getting a lot of him as a QB2. And we feel good about when we stack him with one of these guys or one of the guys above them, based on where he's going, because he's the 11th round pick, and it's more than reasonable to invest that with him.
Well, yeah, and one thing with him is, like you said, we're buying the dip, but so many people are out on him. Yeah. And I'm like, why are you so harsh on him when my biggest thing with him is when he does play well, and he has played really well, like you were saying, the first 10 weeks last year. He's, everybody's favorite quarterback all of a sudden. But then when he plays a little, he starts to go downhill and doesn't win in big games. That's the biggest problem with him. He has not won in the big games. The charge, that's what hurts him more than anything. And I'm not going to hate on him because they could win the division. They could be the
I saw a tweet,
division winners.
And again, this is how recency biased most people are. But after it's just reacting to his extension, and one of the higher apps like Sleeper was posting something of Trevor Lawrence is getting $55 million. Just imagine what Jordan Love's going to get. You mean a guy that's only been a above average starter for 8 games in his entire career? He's older
with worse receivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's, again, if you want to run that team, cool. I'm glad you're not running my team. That's
Yeah,
basically how I view that. And we'll talk about Jordan Love in a second because he is ranked above Trevor Lawrence, and reasonably so. But extension, you got to separate fantasy from
talent.
realism
Yeah,
and
real
talent.
talent. Yeah.
And he's way too talented to not be in this range, but nobody else is on it. So we're going to buy the dip and hopefully be on the right side of things.
So Caleb Williams, you know, one thing about Caleb Williams, he is 2 spots ahead. We have him the highest out of everybody except for Sleeper. Sleeper matched us at 11. Um, for me, he has all the talent around him. Like I love how everybody's like, oh, he's having this bad throw in camp. He did this in camp. I'm like, y'all just want to try to.
Jamar Chase had drops,
Oh my gosh, yeah,
problems, made him fall, and then he had one of the
greatest
best rookie
rookie year
seasons ever.
Yeah, like to stop with the early mini camp stuff. Like Caleb Williams, he was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. We broke him down multiple times, and if you look at his receiving room and his tight end Cole Kmet, like the just so much talent. I don't know why there's so much hate.
It's
But
one of the best, walking into the NFL situations that you can remember from a rookie quarterback being able to do that. Other than, Patrick Mahomes kind of inheriting an all-time great coach, the best tight end ever, and one of the fastest first ballot Hall of Fame wide receivers.
Right.
And he gets to wait a year behind a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. Caleb Williams walks into, I think it was the first time that 2 wide receivers on the same team, 5 1,000-yard seasons.
Yeah.
And my only problem is I don't know who to stack him with if I don't go double.
Right.
That's my only problem. He's going at a reasonable range, basically 9th round, 10th round consistently in best ball. In redraft, we haven't even done mocks for ESPN or Yahoo, but he might be going undrafted, being QB 14 and 15, for all we know. And it doesn't make sense. He has the easiest strength of schedule, a 10 scale of 1 to 10, 10.0 in terms of easiest strength of schedule for quarterbacks this year. And again, we talked about how Chicago will be a playoff team. We're that high on him. They deserve to be that high regarded in our eyes. And he has the weapons. He has the talent. Don't know if he truly has the coaching yet, but he is. I'm fine with him being QB1. Maybe
Right.
I need a above average QB2, but I think he can consistently get you what you need to win leagues.
Right. And he's going behind Jared Goff.
Yeah.
A guy that has
the thing is
different upside.
Again,
so.
like I talked to you, Detroit can score 30 points. And I don't know if that's 4 touchdowns from Gibbs and Montgomery or if it's 4 touchdowns to, Sam Laporta and Monroe, right? Yeah. If Chicago scores 30 points, which they have the schedule to do it consistently, DeAndre Swift ain't the reason that they're going to be scoring 30 points.
Right.
Or Roshan or Khalil Herbert, whoever their running back room is. It's going to be because Caleb Williams is setting records for his team. And setting franchise records this year in passing yards, passing touchdowns would be considered a disappointment if he doesn't.
Because I think they're set by.
It's just so bad.
Who is it?
Sid Luckman.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, Kyle Orton.
No. So it's we're really high on him, and he deserves to be in this spot. Yeah. And we're not going to put him above because we also still need to see it. But yeah, nothing you can do to go wrong with Caleb being your QB1 if you wanted to, and he's going in the QB2 range, which is awesome.
Yeah. So, and then you get Jordan Love. We just talked about him a little bit. Has a lot of receivers. Not sure who to stack him with either. He's got way too many receivers going on. I mean, he's got 4 receivers and then tight ends, 2 tight ends. When Tucker Kraft comes back, it's just a lot of stuff going on there. But Jordan Love, like we've talked about multiple times, he had a really great stretch to end the year. And that was, starting on Thanksgiving. After that, he just, had a great stretch to end the year. And, kind of created that recency bias and made people feel like they had to pay him. He sat out 2 years. He's, 25, 26 now? And like we said, he's older than Trevor Lawrence. He's older than basically... almost everybody above him except for maybe Lamar.
He'll be turning 26 this year.
Yeah, so that tells you a lot about, he has that age already and he got to sit for 2 years behind one of the greatest to ever do it. Yeah, we should expect him to be, good. But at the same time, he wasn't amazing. He wasn't
Mhm.
like some special guy that was just took over and right away was just the guy.
Mhm.
So,
And the thing with Jordan Love, also top 5 strength of schedule against quarterbacks. We have him smack down in the middle. He's ranked 10th. He's our 10th in ours.
mhm.
Basically, only 2 people are different, and that's what makes it 10. Is one's 9 and one's 11.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong. Very easy to stack. I just can't confidently tell you who is that guy because Jaden Reed, when they put up 40 against Dallas, right? Jaden Reed was their leading receiver, right? He had 0 catches. And Dontavius Wicks and Romeo Dobbs, 2 touchdowns, and Luke Musgraves going for end around or down the sideline, and Christian Watson
Yeah.
is a over the top guy. I don't know who to stack him with, but I know that he'll put up numbers, and he should at least. And he's worthy of being in this, right in the middle of this tier.
Yep. And then one of our biggest negative ADP differences is Anthony Richardson. He's down 3.5, basically 3.4 on our board, and it's just because he's played 2 games. We're really overvaluing
He's
his.
finished 2 games.
It's
He got hurt in the other 2,
and he
and he
doesn't.
probably didn't work out
Do
for
we
him.
believe that he's a guy that can take care of his body? I don't know. Is he a guy that he doesn't have a ton of? He's not going to have a ton of targets. He and we talked about Justin Herbert are going to have 2 of the lowest like attempts per game. And on top of that, you can stack him, which is good at least. You can see that. But if they get inside the 20, I'm betting on JT, running the ball in, over one of these other guys catching the ball for a touchdown. So he's a really weird player because he has so much upside, but at the same time he has so much downside.
He has the biggest risk in this range. And obviously, everybody else has him as a top 6 quarterback. Some of them have them as a top 5, and he's our QB9. That's a big difference. I cannot justify picking him above Dak, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, especially with the options that you
CJ
have to stack him
Stroud.
with. Look at if you look at Michael Pittman, you got to invest a 3rd round pick in him, and then after that, there's no fantasy relevant tight end. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor doesn't really correlate with him because they're basically going to vulture each other's touchdown productivity on the ground. But Josh Downs and Alec Pierce and rookie A.D. Mitchell, all guys that are just kind of, from a fantasy perspective, not exciting.
Meh.
I would never in a redraft start anybody but Michael Pittman, and I got to invest a lot in him to get that. And I'm just not comfortable with that, especially when Michael Pittman is not a huge red zone threat. He's not a big yak guy.
No, yeah, he's a 13
He had
catches
less
at
than 10
13
yards
and
a
fall
catch
down.
last year.
Yeah,
So
he's just a fall down
less
guy.
than 5 touchdowns. It's just not great. And don't love the stack. It's an unknown. He did not ever he didn't have a single college season where it's just like he had the Jaden Daniels 4,000 yards throwing, 50 touchdowns, 1,000 yards rushing. He had none of that. It's just he's really big, he's really fast, he's really strong.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that he's right. Well, guess what? Trey Lance was really fast and could throw the ball very far, and he was benched after 2 starts and then broke his leg and then was traded. And that's probably the end of him.
Yeah, which is sad, but that is what it is. That's the NFL.
It's the recency bias of
he had a couple good games.
Yeah,
and he's a really big athletic dude. Like you're like, holy crap! Like
the
he's
reason
massive.
Pittman, if Michael Pittman played the entire season with Anthony Richardson last year,
he's not a top 15.
He would be 7th round pick. He would be riding the Godwin and all these, 2nd tier rookie receivers. Because he played with Gardner Minshew and they were playing from behind and, had to throw it a lot.
Yeah.
And he was the only guy and he got to get 10 to 12 targets a game. That's why his numbers are so high and that's why he's a 3rd round pick.
Right.
Sample size with Anthony Richardson, he had 1 good game and then he had 1 where he was a non-factor. I think he had less than 6 points.
Yeah.
So it's not something I'm comfortable with at all investing in on my roster, especially a 5th round pick where you can get
he's
Kyler or Dak 2 rounds later.
He's fighting with, the number 5 overall quarterback with CJ Stroud. It's like, I don't know about all that.
Sir.
But then, Kyler's next. The last one you just don't know because he missed some games and he's got a rookie receiver that we're banking to be the number one receiver for them, highest ever drafted rookie receiver, which is fine because we think Marvin Harrison's pretty damn good at football. But that's the reason he's in this tier and not higher is because we just don't know. He has great upside with his legs, can throw the ball. We've seen that in past.
And also the thing is similar to what we said about Caleb Williams. When Arizona flirts with 3-4 touchdowns, you know how it's going. Kyler is the offense.
He'll be a part of it. Yeah,
he is the offense. And even when James Conner has annoyed us and stuff like that, it's not the detriment of Kyler Murray. Like Kyler Murray has helped him succeed with receiving
6 catches.
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a defined role where it's going to be Marvin Harrison putting up a ton of numbers his rookie year, or Trey McBride putting up top 3 tight end numbers, and then at the very end of drafts or even waiver wire wise, Michael Wilson or Zay Jones are going to be the wide receiver 2 in that offense and could put up the occasional 12, 13 points you need for a streamer. It's really easy to know where this offense is going. James Conner, again, we've always been annoyed at his talent. He's there. He's right at the end of our RB2 in terms of rankings, but we think that it'll transition to Trey Benson over time. Mm-hmm. But that's why later in the year. Him. And they're reasonably priced. It's all good and gravy. And right now you can get Kyler in the 7th round. He has all the upside.
Yeah. And then moving over to tier 2, this is the guys that, the ceiling is just as high as the tier 1 guys. It's just the floor isn't necessarily as good. Starting off with Dak, everybody wants to hate on Dak, but Dak has some amazing numbers throwing the ball. There's games where, you're not surprised if he throws for 400 yards.
Yeah.
And that's why his, like we said, the ceiling is so high with him. He does not have rushing upside. That's one thing that hurts him a little bit, but yeah.
The epitome of Dak is he plays even better from behind from a fantasy perspective because we have to separate the two.
Yes.
That playoff game against Green Bay where they were blown out, one of his worst games ever. It was embarrassing. I was at that game. I threw my drink and left before the game ended. He had 36 fantasy points.
Y'all got beat by like 30. How?
Yeah. He had 403 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Not surprised.
And like I said, he does better at trailing. He does great against tomato cans. 6 of his final 9 games are at home this year. And it's clearly defined. Based on how they invested in the running back situation this year, they're not going to be having 15 rushing touchdowns.
Nope,
it's all going to be through the air.
Yep.
And CeeDee Lamb is wide receiver 1 for a reason. He overtook Tyreek Hill, and when Tyreek Hill was on a great pace, and then he slowed down a little bit because of Tua's play. Well, CD got better as the year went on, and if you had him in Week 17, let me pull up the numbers again. Against Detroit, Week 17 was championship week. CeeDee Lamb 44 points, 13 for 227 and a tutty. Yeah, that was really fun, and obviously Dak was a huge part in that. And again, Jake Ferguson. He's always had a top 10 tight end in terms of fantasy. And then wide receiver 2, I don't know if somebody's going to be fantasy relevant on a weekly basis, but Brandon Cooks is going the 150s in best ball, and Jalen Tolbert has upside to at least be on the field more this year. It's really easy if you are able to get CD to get Dak based on where he's going. And
in the 80s, I think.
Offensive upside. Yeah, he's
in
80s,
the 6th round,
the 90s, and underdog. His ADP overall is all over the place, and it shouldn't be because they're going to be throwing the ball no matter what. And later in the season, when the big weeks where your money's getting made, they've got the schedule to where he can continue to do that, especially in the contract year.
Right. Yeah, Dak makes a ton of sense. Even Kevontae Turpin.
Yeah.
A guy in the 20th round.
Kickoffs are, going to be 10x. And
if he gets on the field and he catches a few balls, why not, right?
Yeah.
That's in best ball. And then Joe Burrow up next, like we said earlier, or I don't know if this was that video. We have T. Higgins signing his franchise tag. Yeah, he will be there.
He just got extended, or not extended, but he signed his tag. He's not going to, hold out of camp. He will be there at least this year. And
Jamar Chase is obviously there.
It's a clearly defined Look at what they invest in the running back situation. They let go of Joe Mixon and then sign Zach Moss.
That is a step down,
It's a
everybody.
step down,
Don't
and that
think
means that Joe Mixon, who always had 10 touchdowns a year, that's no longer a for sure thing. It's going to be a committee by running back.
Chase Brown's a good
And
receiving
then,
back.
Jamar Chase has the highest ceilings
Yeah,
of anybody, because even in a down year last year, he still put up, one of the games was a 50-point
50.
game.
Yeah, not surprised.
Yeah, it's awesome. He's my favorite
True,
receiver from a
true
talent.
receiver. Right.
And I'm not, if you put him as wide receiver 1, I'm not going to fault you whatsoever. T. Higgins is obviously a great and one of the best wide receiver 2s in football. Tight end wise, they invested in Mike Gesicki.
Best tight end they've had.
Best tight end they've had, and he's been okay, but it's not like that's going to be the thing that bites you, and it's really easy to invest in him late in best ball drafts. Chase Brown, really reasonable price range.
Don't forget about Jermaine Burton.
Jermaine Burton is a rookie receiver filling in for Tyler Boyd now. You know exactly where this offense is going to go if they are going to put up points. Slightly above average schedule. And they're the only team in the AFC North that does not have a top 5 hardest strength of schedule. They're right in the middle of the pack. So they should be back. Joe Burrow, the only thing is injury concerns, but literally we can't play the injury game because we are drafting for upside. We're not drafting for, I hope he doesn't get hurt.
Right. And then jumping to the next guy, CJ Stroud. He is basically where consensus has him, but I know a lot of people. It's a very difficult game with him because some people are really really high, and some people are like, "Hey, sophomore slump incoming." Me personally, he has too much talent around him to not continue. There's no way. Even
the thing that's tough with CJ is that his all 3 of his top receivers are going in the first 3 or 4 rounds. And so, again, you have to decide early, and then you get him after them. But you got to hope he falls. And on top of that, again, Houston had the lowest win total projected last year. Has a crazy great season. Nothing to take away from. One of the best rookie seasons ever. But we shouldn't be like, oh, yeah, all of a sudden, top 3 team, they're going to be the ones to dethrone Kansas City. I'm not there yet. I think there will be a little bit more inconsistencies, but they should put up a lot of points. They're one of the most talented rosters in football. All of a sudden, they won the offseason, in our opinion, from the moves they made. It's just you got to invest really early. They have a Week 14 bye, which is tough. It's never, if you're the final week trying to figure out if you're going to make it or not, you're not going to be able to rely on Houston. So you got to bite that bullet. But it's really easy to get to. He's going in the late fifth round.
Yeah.
Really easy to get to. Like I said, high octane offense. Somewhat hard strength of schedule, 7th toughest against quarterbacks. But again, talent is just too much.
Yeah, I just feel like he's kind of matchup proof with the amount of talent around him because he has guys that can kind of do everything. You have Stephon Diggs, you have Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. I'm thinking Joe Mixon will probably try to catch some balls out of the backfield. So yeah, I think that they're going to be able to, be a little bit more matchup proof than other teams just because they have people everywhere and different kinds of players.
Right.
Then jump into Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP. But, there's always reservations with him because of the fact that, he runs the ball. That's amazing. That's a great thing, but he might only throw for 150. And that's a little scary, especially a lot of people want to get on the Derrick Henry train and things like that.
He's probably more volatile compared to every other quarterback in this range.
Yes,
but can't deny his upside
because
look in the divisional round, 39 points because of his 100 yards. Week 17, that was kind of when he won the MVP versus Miami when they blew him out, 39 points. But also, first 10 weeks, you got a 9-point game, you got a 12-point game, you got a 12-point game, you got a 12-point game, you got a 15, you got a 15.
And they probably won those games.
Yeah, they did.
That's the part that's cool about him is the Baltimore team, but it doesn't help us in fantasy necessarily.
Exactly. And then when you look and you compare him to a guy we'll talk about, or the top 3, it's like their worst game is, they got 113 game. The next lowest game, 20.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we rattled off 5 or 6 games where he had less than 15, and that's just kind of the hill you got to die on. You're hoping that he doesn't have the bad week. He's always going to project well,
Mm-hmm.
but he's got the two clear options, Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, that you're going to stack with. Reasonable where they're going fourth and fifth. And you can basically go Zay,
Yeah.
Lamar, and then Mark Andrews back to back to back pretty often. But right now he's just kind of fourth across the board. That's where he is in ours as well. It's just we're not getting to him as much as the others.
Yeah, and it makes sense that he's higher in best ball because of the boom weeks.
Yep.
But we have him, kind of where everybody else does and sees him the same way. So
The reason he's not in the top tier is because you can't and you obviously know who they are
yeah,
if you haven't followed along. But Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. If you buy one of those guys or draft one of them, you could wait all the way to the Baker or Matthew Stafford range to
right,
get.
absolutely.
If you draft Lamar, you better also get a Kyler or Jordan Love or Caleb or a Trevor,
Mm-hmm.
because you need 6-7 weeks instead of just 2 or 3.
Right, of course.
Because he won't always be your starter pretty often. He won the MVP last year, and he had about 7 games where he just wasn't even a QB1.
Yeah, but he'll get you 40. So those are the things that you have to. That's the trade off with him. Moving to the best of the best. You start with Jalen Hurts. The guy that created the tush push with him and Jason Kelsey, but Jason Kelsey's is gone now, so I don't know if it's going to be as effective. But rushing upside, 2 really really good receivers, solid tight end when healthy. Saquon now, who hasn't actually done that well in the receiving game. I know that that's a stat that we've talked about in the past, but could come back to form in the receiving game. Just guys all around him, going to have one of the best offenses in football and a guy you can bet on. So,
yeah, I mean, overall, in terms of points per game during the regular season last year, second best at 22.6. He actually had a down year in terms of passing touchdown production, but he,
made up for
it with 15 rushing touchdowns.
Right.
So he's the ultimate dual threat quarterback. He's not going to be the guy that gets 300 passing yards a game, which is why he's third. However, really, really easy to just kind of justify him. I feel like the quarterbacks overall, in terms of ADP, where they're going, is lower this year by a full round for these top guys, because lately when we've been really kind of focusing and talking back and forth, like you have the Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, multiple guys in the second round or even early third. And a lot of these drafts that we're doing in best ball, the first quarterback's not off the board till the fourth round.
Right.
And so people aren't investing as high, but I don't know if that's necessarily the way to go with them. If you're a Philly guy, you got to invest early. With AJ Brown being an early first round or late first round pick, and Devontae Smith kind of middle of the second. We saw somebody today draft him 14th overall and way early, but he got Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I got all 3.
That's how you're able to do it. But moving on to Patrick Mahomes, number 2. Obviously, we're the only person other than ESPN currently with him as a top 2 quarterback. We just think it's a much improved receiving core. He had his worst year ever. He won the Super Bowl. Anyways, doesn't matter. But he's eventually going to get to the point where he's a 5,000-yard, quarterback threat every year, despite his receiving core. We just didn't see it last year because literally every single, dot he's throwing, doesn't know if it's going to be caught or not.
Yeah.
I think it's a little better. You can have that more optimism this year with those guys, no longer having to rely on Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore. Obviously, if they're on the roster, they could be cut for all we know, but they're not going to be on the field much. Marquise Brown, former first-round pick, has not really come into his own as a wide receiver 1, but he's better than what Juju was when Juju was reasonable. Xavier Worthy, they invested a first-round pick in. I don't know if he can be a wide receiver 2 or 3 on your team, but I know that he's good enough to where on 3rd and 15, if he's open on a dig route, the ball is probably going to be caught. And then obviously Rashee Rice, don't know with the suspension situation, but he actually was the one lone bright spot outside of Travis Kelce last year, which he also came off his worst year. And with an improved receiving group, he won't be tripled
Yeah, the
on
whole
3rd and 6,
time. Yeah.
and won't be banged up. So
Well, I think for this team, it's a night and day, of course, change, but like they're going to be starting, two new receivers, and Rashee Rice will be in his second year, which is huge development between year one and year two. So we'll learn a lot. That's one thing. That's why Patrick Mahomes is higher than Jalen Hurts on
yeah,
our board.
his ranking with us will actually stick out even more if you look at our overall ADP. Because we have him 11 spots higher than the average, which most people have him going in the mid 4th or early 5th round.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, man, middle of the 3rd round, if you were able to get Kelsey late, or it's easy to stack him there on
Right.
on a double. Or, obviously you have to invest a little earlier than you probably like for Brown or Xavier Worthy.
But if you have Kelsey, if you have Patrick Mahomes, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You just go and do it because it's like, okay, well, I have now doubling the points every time we score a touchdown. But consensus wise, Josh Allen is one, and
Yes.
he's going to stay there because he has killed it in fantasy the last 2 years. Now,
No one's been close.
not even close. But I will say this feels very Patrick Mahomes-esque from last year. You lose everybody receiving wise. You have, your best receiver is your tight end. Sounds a lot like last year, right? You have a rookie receiver that you're hoping steps in. Last year it was Rashee Rice for the Chiefs. Now it's Keon Coleman. You're hoping to piece together some like guys that haven't ever been wide receiver twos, even in Curtis Samuel and Shakir. I'm missing one, Chase Claypool, like MVS. You're just repiecing together Kansas City to me, and of course that brings him down, but he has the rushing upside that Patrick Mahomes did not have.
In the fantasy season last year, in the 17 weeks, only 5 games he didn't have a rushing touchdown, and 4 times he had 2.
Yeah.
And then in games he wasn't, he's throwing for 350 and 324. Like literally, he is the highest percentage of offensive production of anybody is because of him.
So good.
And obviously they lose Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, so probably less 300-yard games.
Right.
But James Cook, even though we like him as a running back, he is going to get vultured because he has designed quarterback runs from the 8-yard line. It's not like he's getting tush pushed.
No, yeah, he's going.
He's like, no, I'm the fullback, and I have the ball.
He's such a competitor.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much fun. I mean, he's out there talking trash. And the cool thing is he can kind of back it up because he's like, what, 6'5", 240? Like it's like hitting a truck, But that's why, he sits at the number 1 spot because he has the perfect balance of capability with his arm and running. But he did get closer to everybody else. He's going to look way more human. He will be way more human this year. And that's why you look at his best ball and his draft position versus everybody else. He was 25th last year, 24th last year. Now he's in the 30s. Now we're getting a little bit farther back. But yeah, he's an otherworldly player and competitor. So of course he's going to be number 1 for everybody. That's not even a decision. If you think it's different, you're a little crazy because of consistency.
But also, like you said, kind of baked in with like him being a little bit more human this year. Well, that's what his ADP is doing. Like it's dropped because we saw him. He's first quarterback off the board, but going early 4th instead of mid-2nd, which is probably not something we would do. But it's not like we're calling somebody an idiot for doing that.
Getting the best quarterback
in the early 3rd round or whatever. Dalton Kincaid, we love. Keon Coleman, I don't know how instantly he will produce, but him, Curtis Samuel, Shakir, all those guys reasonably priced that will have the boom weeks, so they'll rise up in best ball. You can't go wrong there, and that's why he's our QB1.
Just piecing it together there in Buffalo. But so that's the end of this rankings. Please get in the comments and tell us what you liked, what you disliked. I know y'all will because it's the quarterback rankings, and we have some stands that are a little bit different than consensus. But please get in there and talk with us, and we'll discuss with y'all about why. And
tell us who your not quarterback one is, but who's your number one priority? Like when you're looking through these best balls that we're getting heavy into that we've been doing, or starting to look into the mocks for ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, what have you. Better not be on CBS because that platform sucks. But wherever you're drafting, who's the guy that you're getting to a lot, and
Yeah.
who's somebody that you want to go? Because just because we have Josh Allen number one, that doesn't mean if I draft 100 teams, I'm going to have the most of him.
Right.
Like it's all about value where you're going, and and also the stacks.
Yeah.
Because if you're not confident with the Bills' skill players, then that's completely fine to pass on him. But
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. So also, I want to know who's your biggest like differential.
oh
Like,
yeah,
who are you completely fading,
yeah,
and then who are you also being like, no, I have to take this guy around early
yeah,
because I can't miss out.
exactly. So
Um, of course, that has to do with stacks a little bit, but come on, I want to know because there's going to be some players this year, just like every year, that are going to break out and do better than their ADP.
right.
So
Yeah, because I mean we're growing and growing. Community's getting more interactive, which is fun. We've been having a good time interacting with you guys so far, and we are looking forward to continuing to do that. So yeah, tell us all about it. Look out for our running back, receiver, tight end rankings that we have coming out. We'll probably do at least one more quarterback ranking.
yeah, before the
Later in the
season,
season
yeah,
starts, as best ball really starts picking up, and really it doesn't really matter if you're doing mock drafts and redraft yet. Most people don't draft till August anyways, but it's never too early to start looking, and
right,
that's why we usually get a leg up on the competition because we start this shit in May.
yeah,
And
this
that, like, some people don't open their laptop up until a week before,
right.
and you want to get every advantage you can, and this is the way to do it: is looking, watching, and drafting now.
Yeah,
So
especially when we get to, of course, best ball, but when we get to auction drafts, which is going to be one of our biggest things on this on our site, is you have to get drafting and you have to see the trends and the different things because they're not easy if you don't have any like kind of mock draft done before
mhm,
that. We have
exactly.
friends that we play with that won't mock draft until the day of, and it's like, oh, you're behind, bud.
Hmm.
So, yeah, we really appreciate y'all being here and hanging out with us, and yeah, we can't wait to do our running back video and see
Hmm.
y'all next time.
Yep. Take care, guys.